Good morning, good day, good evening to everyone who's joining us now live on our channel SAMexpert TV. And we are back today with our colleague, the guy who halves Azure bills, Stefan Denk, our head of cloud services. Not even cloud services, we don't provide cloud services. Cloud consulting in terms of cost savings and optimization of the cloud resources and cloud economics. And my name is Alexander Gorev. Those of you who have been to our channel, you know me. If you haven't, I am the head of consulting and services in SAMexpert. And this is the channel where we share our knowledge with the audience freely and happily. And today we're going to share our knowledge and advice to those of you who want to learn how to cut, how to slash, how to reduce, optimize your Microsoft Azure bills by following the initial, we put 5 in the heading in the title of this event, the initial 4 to 6 steps. And I have Stefan here exactly for that. So I'll be asking questions. Stefan will be answering those questions. Let me introduce the company itself. So SAMexpert, I have to do it, is a Microsoft cost savings consultancy. So everything related to Microsoft will help you reduce or optimize or reshuffle the costs so your money is properly spent. We don't sell Microsoft licenses. We don't sell Microsoft services. All the advice we give you here is completely unbiased, not biased by sales targets. Stefan, come back to you. Let's begin with a very, very simple question. Any organization that we can think of that hasn't yet started a cloud optimization journey, what would be the first step? What would be the quickest, the easiest win for them to reduce their cloud bill in Microsoft Azure?
The easiest way how I've ever saved a company $1 million is by applying a method which you have already talked about on this channel several times in the past, Sasha, and I invite everybody to watch these videos to figure out how exactly this works, because we won't be showing this in the portal today. This is to use your existing license entitlements from your enterprise agreement, from your CSP deal, from whatever contract you have with Microsoft, also an MCA deal, and use these inside of Azure, activating the Azure hybrid use benefit. We see this time and time again that there is either no coverage and virtual machines in Azure are still renting Windows licenses from the Azure platform. And just ticking this checkbox, which if it's done by a cloud engineer, this person can write a PowerShell script. It takes them literally a few minutes to tick these or manually go through the virtual machines. At the last hour of the week, get everything ticked, which is your environment. The odds are you are going to save millions over the years to follow from that action alone. And if you want, I can quickly show you what this actually means if we are having a virtual machine running with the option of rent a license from the cloud versus bring your own license, because I think not all of our viewers may know.
Can you prepare your screen before we share it? But I want to those of you who are not technical, I want to explain to you this concept in the easiest way possible. I hope it's easy to understand. If your organization already has Microsoft licenses, there must be licenses of certain type. They must be on a subscription, or you have to pay software assurance fees. You can take those licenses if you're not using them on premise, and some of those licenses can be used simultaneously in your data center on your service and in Azure. So you can take them and bring them to Azure and tell Microsoft, as Stefan will demonstrate us, I have a license. And the benefit of that is financially, is that cost of license that you have and you pay subscription fees can reduce, compared to the cost of license that you pay as you go in Azure, could be down to 5%. You won't have it on every single virtual machine. Sometimes the saving is 20, 30%. Sometimes it's 75 on average. Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong. I think 75% was on average what we calculated. But there are extreme cases where Microsoft, for some reason, charges exorbitant money for the Windows Server license for I would say high-spec machines. And your license fee remains the same. So on those machines, the saving is even higher. And that is something you can start doing just immediately after this live event. Shall we have a look at the screen, Stefan?
Yes, please. And I would like to show the people how they can actually get towards the tool which we are going to use throughout the session today. We need to find the Azure pricing calculator. So we want to have the pricing calculator of Microsoft. And in here, you see all the services which Microsoft provide as a first-party service on the Azure cloud platform. You can log in order to load your own company's custom pricing. If you have, for example, an enterprise agreement with a MAC discount, this is something that you can fetch in here. For today, we are going to use the public price list, which is the retail price, which everybody can leverage. So for my account, I'm paying this by a credit card. I'm seeing these prices here, and I'm paying these prices. There are a number of tabs which you can use to find the right services. You can also search for products. We now want to look at virtual machines. So just to explain you how this calculator works, it is going to look up the word virtual in any of the service descriptions, but virtual machines is one of the favorites. So we just find it right here, and we can check what the virtual machine says. Now, we need to make a few adjustments to this initial selection which we have here. So you may or you may not sit in the East US region. Pick the region which you want to work in. Let's, for example, here in Europe, take a competitive region from pricing with North Europe. And we are going to take a current virtual machine. This is another important one. So we are not going to take a version 3 VM, but we are going to take a version 5 VM. And now let's take one with 8 CPUs, and we can have a look at the cost of this virtual machine. It consists of 2 parts. The part on the left is the cost for the compute itself. The part on the right is the license cost. And as you can see here, the license cost for this virtual machine, 8 cores, is about $270 US. Depending on the rebate level that you have in your enterprise agreement, MCA, if you are getting these from a CSP, we have seen anywhere between 8 times and 20 times cheaper costs for the licenses if you are bringing your existing entitlements. And a little less than this, then so you need to buy a little higher cost if you are not getting a subscription license, or you need to buy a new perpetual license. But the cost difference is tremendous. It is getting lower as you are getting towards virtual machines with fewer CPUs, because in Azure, the specialty is that you always need to assign a minimum of 8 licenses for Windows Server to a virtual machine, even if the virtual machine only has 4 cores. But still, there will be a significant savings, because with your own entitlements, you will be spending something like $15 to $30 per month for the Windows Server licenses, instead of renting it from the Azure cloud platform for a multiple of this cost.
Thanks, Stefan. We have a very interesting, we have a couple of interesting comments. I will highlight this one. You just hope the true-up doesn't kill your financials. So tracking the license use is key, else you will get a nasty bill at the end of the year. There are multiple considerations in regard to existing agreement true-ups in conjunction with Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. One of the services our company provides is we help organizations negotiate enterprise agreements. And before you negotiate an enterprise agreement, you have to put together a bill of materials, what you want to use in the next period. And very often, when we approach the first bill of materials, the software asset management department, and we work with large organizations, they usually have software asset management people there already. The software asset management department just calculates the on-premises consumption, what they need on-premise. Sometimes we help them as well to calculate that figure. And when they see that, for example, they've been paying for 40,000 Windows Server Standard licenses, and they only need now 10,000 because they migrated to the cloud, the initial impulse is just to cancel those extra 30,000 licenses. Stop. At this point, stop and think. Are you using Azure? Can you take those licenses to Azure? Because when you have an old legacy enterprise agreement, you are only paying for a fraction of the license per year. It's not the full cost of a subscription license. Software assurance on its own is about a half of the subscription license. It's not exactly half, it's about a half. So that's an additional potential saving. But if you cancel those licenses, and then you can still use Azure Habit Use Benefit, but you have to procure new subscription licenses, which will be more expensive. So just simply canceling your licenses without assessing the need for the cloud is, I'm sorry, but it's dumb. So please don't make that mistake, which we see, unfortunately, quite often, and we have that, fortunately, opportunity when we work with organizations to stop them from making that mistake. The other side of Azure Habit Use Benefit that we also see, not very often, but sometimes, is admins are aware, FinOps are aware in the organizations, and they tick that box that we have a license on every single license. What you need to check is, first of all, as Stefan just mentioned, for machines with fewer cores, savings are less than for machines with 8 and more cores. And if that machine is not running constantly, or you use 2-core virtual machines, so less powerful virtual machines, there may be no benefit for using Azure Hybrid Use Benefit at all. And you're already promising Microsoft that you have a license. No, they don't audit that yet. But nobody said that tomorrow they won't go to your tenant, download all the data. It's in their databases, and compare it with your licenses. And they won't even need to come to you with an audit. They already know that you have fewer licenses that you're claiming that you have. So Azure Hybrid Use Benefit is a fantastic tool. It does require maybe not a day-to-day monitoring, but at least reconciliations maybe once a quarter, something like that.
So I would like to show one more thing over here. And this is, if you are not sure if you have the licenses, and if it is hard for you to have a conversation with your procurement team, your software asset management team, and you would like to already do something good for your organization, Microsoft offers an interesting intermediate way. So the different letters in the compute, we have the capital D. These are all your general purpose VMs. There is a E-series, which we are going to talk about later, which is a memory optimized, where you get fewer CPUs for the same amount of RAM, making the system cheaper and needing less licenses. We also have burstable machines, and the burstables come in a version 1 and a version 2. By the way, we recommend always picking the latest generation for the VM series, which you can choose. They are usually way better, faster, get a better price, get better performance than the older ones, but we are going to probably circle back to this a little later on.
Sorry, Stefan, can I pause you for a second? Can you just formulate this advice in one sentence? Because I understand what you're talking about, but I want our audience to grasp exactly the advice that you're giving right now.
Absolutely. So if you see my screen here and we look at the D series, because there is the most prominent one. The D series was released together with Azure when it started in 2010. So this is 15-year-old infrastructure. DS version 2 came out more than 10 years ago. Version 3 came out around 2017. There, the systems changed from assigning you a full core to assigning you a hyperthread, so half a core. That made the version 3 system slower in the tests which we have run. Version 4 got a little faster, and version 5 has now the performance of the old versions back again. This means that whenever you select for services, check if you are able to select the latest version. We still see a whole lot of people using the version 3 virtual machines because these are still shown by default. It's the first choice that you are getting presented when you're opening the pricing calculator or when you are provisioning a virtual machine in the Azure portal. And so a lot of people follow it because what's the difference between a version 3 VM with 4 CPUs and a version 5 VM with 4 CPUs? I can tell you, not my words, but this is what I heard a friend system administrator telling me. These ones here felt very slow, a little bit like walking through syrup. These ones felt like they were just coming out of the data center where we were before we moved to Azure. So there is not only a price difference, but there is a huge usability and how the system feels and performs and handles. between the older versions and the latest version. So please move to the latest version whenever you can. May not save you money, but it will make your life and your users' life a lot better.
Actually, it is a way to save money. And let me again try explain it in my words.
Mm-hmm.
Effectively, if you procure new virtual machines, go for the latest generation. That's what Stefan is trying to say. Mm-hmm. And if you, this is a bit of a rocket science because we jumped from a very simple measure, which is Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. Nothing you need to do, just assign your licenses to Azure, tick the box, and your bill immediately decreases. To a bit of a complicated question of, I already have an infrastructure. It makes sense, following what just Stefan said, to review your existing virtual machines and see which ones you can migrate to a newer generation. That is not an easy feat. You may not be able to stop and restart machines that you use in production, but at the end of the day, it is. So we can't. I need to caveat this. We can't legally disclose and run any tests. It's against the terms of Azure. What we suggest your admins to do is to do performance testing yourselves and have those results for yourselves and confirm for yourselves internally, because that doesn't violate the terms of service, confirm for yourselves that you see different performance. And if you do see different performance, I can give you a hint how you can reduce your costs. Say currently you run an older generation with 8 cores, and you notice in your tests, hypothetically, that the 4-core VM of a new generation gives you the same performance results. That is your saving. You buy a cheaper virtual machine with the same performance. That's not a quick window. It's a bit of a slower one. So I don't know, Stefan, from your experience, I used to be a sysadmin. I would say that is not a 90-day win if you are.
It works. In our experience, it works. Engineers can usually reboot non-production machines more or less any time, because these tend to not have a service level agreement. And so far, I've usually seen a maintenance window on a monthly or on a 90-day basis. And it literally takes a restart of the virtual machine, which you often have to do anyway along your Windows update cycle. So you can combine the size change together with a Windows update. I would like to show you for a moment what Microsoft is publishing around performance tests. If we search for virtual machine and disk performance, there are some conversations first about the throughput capping. And then let's see if I have this on the right one here. Nope, this is only the disk ones. I probably need to find not the disks, but the virtual machine one. So let's just try this one again. To give you an idea how to find the results which you need. Azure machine sizes, VM size. It's definitely not in the top results anymore. Let's try compute benchmark scores. So here Microsoft is publishing benchmark scores which they run with CoreMark. But this page is no longer being maintained and is planned for archival already in the past. So lucky we've still found it, because what Microsoft does is they have run CoreMark tests on the virtual machines, and they are publishing the average score which these have received. And what we can do is just to work back on the claim which I made that the D version 3 was a little on the slower side. Let's see if I find that one. Here we are. So if we take a 16-core D version 3, the measurements are around 170 to 180,000 for Microsoft's own measurements. Let's hold this thought, and now let's go to the version 5. We have this here on the top. There is certainly a version 5 is there. Now let's take this one here, and there for a 16 version 4 AMD, we see 286,000 versus 170,000. So even Microsoft is publishing here that between the version 3 Intel and the version 4 AMD, and on version 5 we see this for both Intel and AMD, there is a significant performance difference. And the way how we render measurements is we used a tool called Passmark performance test. This is a tool which you can use on Windows as well as on a Linux environment. Your sysadmin can download this, install it on a blank virtual machine in your environment, execute it. It takes about 10 minutes, and it will show you the performance score for your CPU, for your memory, and for your disk, and just make the comparison between the different VM times you are running and come to your own conclusions. They will be eye-opening. But the Microsoft tests already hinted a little towards that. And this is free.
This is fascinating what you're saying. It's really fascinating. So Anders is asking, are you implying that moving existing VMs to the new series will be cheaper? No. What we're implying is it will be faster. And the traditional on-premises approach, where you would buy better hardware just in case, because that was always the case. I mean, I was a sysadmin in 1998. And we would, as long as we had the budget, we would always opt for a better, more powerful hardware, and it wouldn't be utilized most of the time. It would be utilized to 5 or 10% of its capacity. In the cloud, if you are good, if you have good FinOps processes, you would probably be right-sizing your virtual machines, your performance, your processes, your memory. And when you migrate to similarly spec'd and comparably similarly priced machines of a newer generation, if you trust the numbers that even Microsoft itself published, you can see that you can downsize them without losing performance, potentially. So you do need to run your own tests. What we can tell is that we've applied this with our clients, and we had wins without sacrificing performance. So that's what we're implying here. That is the message.
Picking back up on this, so we just saw in the compute benchmark scores that the D16 version 3 scored around 170,000. Let's check what the E8 is scoring with the AMD cores. Where are we? E8. And here we see that the E8 is scoring 150,000. So it is only about 10% slower by Microsoft's own rating, which indicates, and we have seen that in our own testing, these numbers of Microsoft, we could reproduce them, is that a system which is on a 16-core environment in the version 3 can be replaced by a system on 8 cores in the version 5. And if we move from the general purpose virtual machine to the memory optimized virtual machine, we retain the same amount of memory, we halve the CPUs, and the cost goes down a lot. And this is now only counting Windows licenses. If we are adding a SQL environment on top of this, and let's maybe not do SQL Enterprise to make it that stark of a difference, but we are running a SQL standard system on a D16 machine, so a 16-core general purpose VM, seen plenty of these, 64 gigabytes of RAM, we can probably get the same SQL server to run on a 8-core VM of the latest generation. And the difference between these two, without even bringing any licenses and benefiting from this, is already you're halving the cost without doing any other measures. And if you then continue to bring your licenses, you're again reducing this here to a fraction of the cost. So this is something which, if you are able to have a conversation with your database admin teams and they have a little bit of a risk appetite, you can see if you have a system which is not continuously performance capped, running on an older generation virtual machine, upgraded to the latest generation, stick with the D series for the start. And if your CPU utilization then falls below 50%, then change it out for a virtual machine which has half the number of CPUs and needs half the number of licenses.
Thanks, Stefan. I wanna move our conversation to our next question, which is, so we've discussed an easy way to save, to reduce the bills, which is Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. We looked at the different generations of virtual machines, which, since I've been in IT, I I have certain reservations. It involving various departments and planning and admins. It's an achievable saving, but it's a bit more complicated. What's the next easy, quick win after Azure Hybrid Use Benefits? What can somebody start implementing tomorrow that is not that difficult?
So something which again has absolutely no impact on your running systems is to have a look at an option to, rather than using the pay-as-you-go option for a virtual machine, is to look into a way to commit to Microsoft for 1 year of utilization. In our experience, a 3-year plan, which is giving the higher rebates, either for a savings plan or for a reservation, needs a strategy, because on a 3-year horizon, you actually need to have a good understanding, where are my workloads going? It's always easy if they are growing, because you can always add more. With the savings plan, you have a final purchase, so you are locked into a purchase. If you shrink, you are running into an unused savings plan problematic. With the reservations, while you can still exchange them, you have a bit of flexibility to also shrink over time again by continue to extend. But what I would say is, in most organizations, it takes them 3 to 6 months to plan any significant system changes. And with a 40% rebate on a 1-year reservation, if it takes you 6 months for any changes, even if you would be doing something radically different, you kind of already paid for your entire year's consumption. So the next thing I would say a team can centrally do, without needing to involve administrators, without needing to involve engineers, without needing any kind of maintenance windows, is to take a list of the current systems which you have running. The Azure reservation wizard actually helps you determine this by proposing what you could reserve, and start with 1-year reservations on a monthly payment schedule. You can always upgrade this to a 3-year reservation later on. You can always convert this into a savings plan later on, but you immediately reduce the bill for the virtual machine, the compute part, by 40%.
Let's assume that many people on this call, or somebody who's going to watch the video later, have no idea what we're talking about. So I will explain what reservations are. Reservations are basically you telling Microsoft, I want to use this virtual machine. And please bear in mind, it's not just this virtual machine, this type of a virtual machine, because if you delete this one and you still have a reservation, you create the similar machine, it will pick up that discount. You reserve certain part of the cloud for the next 1 or 3 years for yourself, but that virtual machine or per capacity. And it's simple to understand. It's very simple to understand. It's just you reserve that, you promise to pay, you have to pay. Savings plan is a bit more complicated. So, Stefan, can you explain savings plan? I mean, I would say it's complicated. The concept is entirely different.
Yeah, it is more complicated to wrap your head around initially. It is actually easier to run later on. The thing is, with a reservation, you need to be precise. A reservation reserves any one of these entries which you see here. So if you have an 8-core DS version 3 virtual machine and you reserve this, and you change it to an 8-core DS version 5 machine, the reservation will no longer apply, because it is locked to a specific instance series and a specific region.
Series and region, exactly. Yeah,
yes,
it means
you have
that
a free
if you
choice
still
in here. So it doesn't matter if you reserve 1 times 64 or 32 times 2. This is called instance size flexibility. And by the way, there's a nice hack which I can share with our audience. Do you want me to, Sasha?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
It's
so
your show,
if you need,
Stefan.
Of course. So if you're running GPU workloads, let's look at a very interesting one. So there is one specific series, the NCAST4 version 3, which comes in different steps. So you have 4, 8, 16, and 64 vCPUs, but the number of GPUs which you get, if I remember right, is 1, 1, 1, and 4. So it is not a linear increase, but you have like a step up to a new plateau. Now, let's make a comparison between reserving 16 times 4 and reserving 1 times 64 and see where we get to from a price difference. So we get to 16 times 4, giving us 64 CPUs from an instance size flexibility point of view. And we do a 3-year reservation. And now let's duplicate this one. And we do 1 time 64. And sorry, I need to get rid of these two for a second to have a fair comparison in cost, because the OS and the license skew up the cost a little bit. But the difference is that you are paying half the cost for reserving 64 cores if you reserve 1 time the 64 machine, rather than reserving 16 times the 4-core virtual machine, because of this different amount of GPUs you get. But Microsoft did not map, the last time I checked this, in the instance size flexibility sheet. By the way, just to prove this point, let's go.
Wait a second. This is amazing. So let me try and explain this how I understand it. That tell me if I'm wrong or not. So I place a reservation for 64 cores for a 64 core virtual machine, and the way this flexible assignment works is that if you then don't procure that virtual machine, but procure smaller machines, you still pay that one initial sum. But reservation still applies to 64 cores, but spread across multiple virtual machines.
Yes, that's how it works. Microsoft actually explains this. So just for reserved instance size flexibility, on the very top you have examples. And it's giving this example that you have 2 VMs with 2 CPUs each and 1 VM with 4 CPUs. So you have 2 plus 2 plus 4 is 8. You can now reserve 4 times 2, 1 times 8. You can reserve one with 16, and then you use half of it. It's super flexible. There is a CSV table which has all the instance size flexibility steps to explain how many units a given VM size is using. And for this series, because when we look back at the CPUs, and we see the CPUs go 4, 8, 16, 64, Microsoft maps this to 1, this to 2, this to 4, and this to 16. But the price does not scale in a linear fashion, making this way cheaper to reserve 1 time the big machine versus many times the smaller machines. But only works for this series. At least I haven't found another one yet.
It's probably because of the GPUs, because they don't scale them in the reservation. That's very interesting.
Yeah, they don't consider these. It's CPU derived, the instance size flexibility, and the GPUs are what makes the pay-as-you-go version more expensive.
That's an interesting hack. So going back to my question, what is a savings plan?
Absolutely. So with the savings plan, you no longer have to worry about the series you are selecting. You no longer have to worry about the region you are selecting. And it's actually not only covering virtual machines, it is also covering premium version 3 app service plans. So what you do with the savings plan is you need to come up with a certain cost per hour, because both the savings plan and the reservation are actually charged by the hour. This is their unit of measure. And you, for example, say, hey, I'm going to consume $10 of compute services, and this is again virtual machines, app service plan, premium version 3, Azure premium functions, 1, 2 more things which maybe still be in there, which I haven't seen yet in use, but mostly virtual machines and app savings and app service plans. And then the savings plan will apply itself. It will start looking for the highest rebate level. So it'll start with the 53%, which is kind of top rebate, unless you're running an M series for your SAP workloads. There the discount goes up to 65%. And then it'll gradually apply itself to services with lower discount levels until it is running out of dollars per hour. And for everything else, you're going to pay pay-as-you-go prices. So the savings plan is super interesting during a phase of change where you simply want to pay a little less, because it still gives 20 to 30% discount on a 1-year savings plan, depending on the virtual machine type you use, 10, 15% on an app service plan. And you basically simply pay less for stuff you're already using, and it allows you to convert the virtual machines, to flip the instance series, to modernize without constantly having to adjust your reservations. And once you have fully figured out where you want to go, you can actually mix reservations and savings plans, which is maybe something we also should discuss, because it's not either or. they can live next to each other.
Sounds marvelous. I love that. Okay. Do you want to still stay on this subject, or do you want to disclose us another cost-saving secret and quick win?
I think I can quickly say how reservations and savings plan work together so people don't run into costly mistakes. Because if you are only looking at the Azure Advisor will give you a fair recommendation what to buy for the savings plan for all your workloads. And it'll give you a fair recommendation what you should buy for your reservations for all of your workloads. A specific workload can be under a reservation X or a savings plan, and the reservation takes priority. Because what the reservation does, it is turning your build cost to zero immediately, and the savings plan apply themselves retroactively on the build cost where the rebate is the highest. If your build cost is zero, the savings plan doesn't apply itself. It looks for the next item where you actually have a positive cost. So if you want to do this, then reserve the workloads which you know are not going to move. Wait for a week or so. The savings plan recommendation will adjust. It always has like a 7 to 14 day delay. If you want to be safe, rather wait 14 days, but after 7 days, you usually get a good recommendation again. When you had a significant change like reserving a good part of your system environment, which we very much recommend. And then you can apply the savings plan per the recommendation of Microsoft if you think that you are going to stay either level or maybe grow your compute footprint. Basically, if these are your outlooks over the next 12 months, you cannot make anything wrong with buying at least a 1 year savings plan over your workloads which you have running today. And this is immediate savings of anywhere between 10 and 30%.
Amazing. I want to do a very, very quick plug. So if you use your phone and scan the QR code that's on screen in the top left corner, it'll take you to this page on our website where we explain what services we provide in Azure cost optimization. So we're not talking about any theoretical knowledge here. This is a service we provide to other companies and organizations. So go back to Stefan.
Okie-doke. Well, I need a new cue, Sasha. What else do you want to know?
Anything else? Okay, yes, I do. Recently, and please tell me why, what your opinion on that is. There's a lot of conversation around savings in the cloud by right-sizing your storage, by optimizing your storage. Wherever you look, on LinkedIn, on the web, in articles, it almost seems like everybody, every FinOps, every company that manages cloud, suddenly storage is a topic number one. Why?
Oh, it is. I've seen storage being the most expensive single service category in cloud bills. So it makes perfect sense to look into storage. However, it's usually not the cloud storage which we see as being the most expensive one, but it is your managed disks. So the things which power your virtual machines. And what we've seen there in the past, we started with standard HDD, and then standard SSD and premium SSD came around, and usually see the majority of the workloads being powered by premium SSD. As a rule of thumb, we think that you should be able to get to a split which is about 30 to 40% premium SSD, 40% standard SSD, and the rest standard HDD. That usually works if you're looking at what the systems really require, but getting from a premium only deployment you may have towards this 30, 40, 30 distribution, that takes a year, and you need some very good linking between your metrics data in Azure and your cost billing data, which is rather brutal to arrive at yourselves. If you would like to get this one done, talk to us. We do have the dashboards, the scripting, and the tools available to help you make this manageable and basically create an Excel for your managers out of this to help do this business transformation of your premium storage towards a distribution of storage types.
That doesn't sound like a quick win at all.
No, it is not. It is not. But okay. There is one part which is a quick win, which is if you're just flipping it. So what I'm talking about is to also reduce the sizes, because if you're looking at the disks, we have seen people provisioning disks because they need a performance. So they would create a disk with 7,500 IOPS and 250 megabytes per second. And this is a 2 terabyte disk in the good old ways of creating storage in Azure. It didn't matter if you created a partition of 64 gigabytes or 2048 gigabytes if you needed the IOPS and the throughput. So a lot of people did. And I would already like to give one piece of advice to you. If you only need 64 gigabytes on a super fast disk, okay, create a P40, but make the partition only 64 gigabytes. And I'm going to show you in a second why and what you can do with Premium version 2. So if you take this disk here, what you can do to make it immediately cheaper, if you do not need the IOPS, you can try to just switch it to a lower tier. So instead of having the premium storage tier, we can do a comparison of what the same disk costs with the different tiers. So if you take a standard HDD, every E40 disk, it is about half the cost. And if we are able to get even towards a standard HDD, which becomes more sluggish, you have higher latency, a higher risk of getting a disk queue, your performance is overall going down, but maybe it is still sufficient because maybe you have a workload which is buffering everything in memory anyway. If you have a comparison at the cost, it is getting radically cheaper, and you can flip twice between these storage tiers every day. It does require a reboot though. If flipping between the storage tier is not getting you all the way you want to, now let's talk about what happens if you created this disk with 64 gigabytes instead of 2048 gigabytes because you needed that data, and we are letting Premium SSD v2 enter the picture. Because there I can create a disk with 64 gigabytes. I can give it the number of IOPS I need. And by the way, I can adjust this on the fly, even without restarting the virtual machine. I give it a megabytes per second I need. And by the way, the limits here are way higher. And have a look at the cost. $33 versus $260.
And that can be done on the fly.
So not a conversion to a Premium SSD v2, but if you are able to do a outage, Microsoft has a wizard now in their disk view, which allows you to convert a Premium SSD v1 to a Premium SSD v2 if the requirements are met. So the virtual machine has to be deployed into an availability zone. If we do the comparison with the 2048 gigabytes, so you're just converting the SSD to an SSD v2 with the same performance metrics. Sorry, it resets the metrics here, unfortunately. You're still able to save about 25%, the exact same configuration, maybe even slightly lower latency on the Premium SSD v2. It's just costing you less than the Premium SSD v1 with the exact same size. And if you can shrink the partition size, and again, we have the tooling for that, basically rebuild a partition magic solution in Azure, and you shrink this one down to the data size you actually need, like 128 gigabytes. And again, adjust this always resets. Then you are getting to maybe even a tenth of the original disk cost. But this takes work, so this is not a super quick fix. Flipping between the tiers is a quick fix. And we are now seeing SQL servers, which previously were only using premium SSDs, being built on a mix of premium SSDs and standard SSDs and even some standard HDDs for the storage where only occasional access is happening. So it can really be used on all workloads.
Thank you. The next question I have is, I'll start with a very short backstory. When we planned this event, we put the identifying underused resources and reducing waste as the point number one in the agenda. And when we had a quick discussion with Stefan just before this event, about 15 minutes before, I said, shall we start from it? And Stefan told me it's not a quick win. It's it's an obvious win. It's an obvious thing you need to do. You need to identify what's not used and right size your usage in the cloud, because it's not like on-prem. It's not a good idea to have everything running all the time or buy extra storage. Sorry, you're renting it. You're not even buying it. You rent extra storage, rent extra compute. And yes, right sizing is the thing that helps you reduce your cloud bills. But can you... I wouldn't say I was fascinated or surprised, but it was a good educational conversation when you said, Stefan, that it's not a quick and easy win. But is there any way? So of course we can provide that service. But if somebody wants to DIY this, if one of our viewers or listeners will just want to basically do it themselves, try it themselves, what sort of tools, what sort of the approach they should take to achieve quick wins in right sizing and optimization, starting from just making sense of the bills and seeing what's underutilized? Are there any quick paths there?
There's one quick path there. A simple question may result in tremendous savings. And this is when we are looking at the app service plans. And let's choose the version which I recommend all of you to use. And this is either basic for your non-production and maybe some production workloads, or premium version 3 for everything which you cannot squeeze into basic. There may be a case for standard, but what we see is, again, doing performance measurements on the environments, is that premium version 3 gives you way better performance at the same cost as standard. Again, it's our observation from running a Linux passmark in a Docker container. Try for yourself, your mileage may vary. If you are looking into the premium version 3, what we have seen in the past is that services are provisioned not with a single instance, but like 3 instances. The intention behind this often is to make these multi-zonal to provide super high availability, like 99.95%. And in the past, we have asked the question, do you need 99.95% on these services? Or are 99.8% sufficient? And we sometimes got the answer, 99.8% are actually sufficient. And what you can then do is you can reduce the number of instances and just check the price and what is happening there from 3 down to 1. And this takes seconds. And you basically divide the cost by the number of instances which are running today. So if it's 3 instances, it's a third. If it's 5 instances, it's a fifth. This is a super quick win where you can look after over-provisioning, and a way to find this in your bill, if you're looking, is check for the quantity field in your cost data. App service plans are measured in units per hour. So if you have 1 instance running, it'll have a quantity of 24 per day. If there are app service plans in your environment which have a quantity of 48, 72, 96, 120, this means that there are multiple instances, because an app service plan with 3 instances reports the cost of its instance type times 72 hours per day.
Stefan, can you please explain to us?
There are a little more difficult parts, but let's see. I mean, for this, you basically need to check the metrics of your system and figure out if it's underutilized, and then shrink it and do this one by one. You can maybe pull some aggregate data out of a log analytics workspace, or you can call us. We'll help you. Again, we've got the tooling and the scripts and the Excels and the dashboards. That's what we do.
Am I frozen?
Yes, you are. Let's hope he's back in a second. Hey!
I don't know. I think I'm still frozen, whatever the reason is.
No.
I was gonna ask you, can you please explain to us what an app service is? Because I have no clue.
Okay.
and also how many clients of ours have app services procured?
Clients, probably most, if not all. An app service is your web server as a service. On Windows, it is IIS, where Microsoft is not just taking care all the way up to the underside of the operating system, like they do with virtual machines, so you then have to take care of the operating system of the IIS and of the application and data running on top. There, Microsoft takes care of the underlying infrastructure all the way up to the IIS server. And you can, of course, also have a Linux variant for that, where the Linux web server versions are being run on your behalf. You still get to deploy your web application into it, be it WordPress, your corporate site, or your e-commerce store. Really, whatever you want to run. You can even drop containers into these environments. And it is your alternative to building your own Apache, your own Tomcat server, or your own IIS server when you're living in the Microsoft world to, for example, run your .NET apps. And most, if not everybody, is using this because this reduces the operational workload for maintaining and patching both the operating system and the web server for a service which tends to be exposed to the public internet. So there, actually, Microsoft is taking not just a convenience service for you, but they are really helping you ensure that your web service, public-facing workloads are well protected. Anything else I can do for you, Sasha, today? And for our audience, it has been quiet. I hope you're not just killing them today with our... Oh my, Sasha is struggling. Do we have any more questions coming from the audience? Maybe also to explain a little more what we shared so far today, or do you want one more? Let's assume you want one more. Okay, I'll show you one more way how you can actually reduce your license spend with a little change in your systems. So let's get back towards virtual machines. And by the way, I can only recommend clicking your way through this Azure pricing calculator. It is so informative to take a system and to just click through things. Like, for example, go through the regions and just press the down button and see how the costs change with different regions getting selected. It's a little slow for me today, but you see it's 150, 150, 137, 150, etc., 180. So different regions have different prices. This is already one observation, but then changing your region when you have already fully settled into one is tricky. But if you're just beginning to settle into an Azure region, use one which has low costs. In Europe, that would be Sweden Central, North Europe, and maybe UK South off the top of my head. In the US, West US 2, West US 3 maybe, East US 2, they also have very low prices and very good service coverage. So it pays to check for this because you are basically paying a multiplier on your Azure cost services if you are going for a more remote region. You may have to, but if you don't, then pick the cheap one. And it's usually the big ones which are cheap. Now, let's take my own advice. And we don't go to UAE Central, but we are going to North Europe. And let's make a comparison between a Windows Server license price we pick a 4 CPU virtual machine. And it would rent a virtual license to me for $134. As we said earlier, you're still going to be significantly cheaper when you're buying licenses, especially if you can bring licenses where you have only software assurance costs, even on a 2-core VM. But if we take the same VM and we are changing it from a VM where you have constant CPU performance to a burstable VM, which would be fully sufficient for your workloads, which only need to have full power for a few hours per day. You get about 2.5 hours of full workload coming out of this. It works, for example, for your domain controllers. It works for other solutions which only have access happening a few times per day, or it works for your workloads which are mostly on idle and occasionally have a spike for performance. They were initially meant to only be used in dev test environment and for development purposes, but this reduction has a long time ago been lifted by Microsoft, and they now have the same service level agreements as the general purpose series, as far as I know and remember. I didn't check lately. But if we make a comparison for the OS cost, because this is a burstable system, it's $13.87 versus $134.32. So it's a tenth of the cost. And for the B series, you may actually be cheaper to, especially for a B2 and maybe for a B4, to rent the licenses for these systems from from Azure, rather than bringing your existing licenses.
Yeah.
If you don't understand exactly what entitlements you have, and if you're fearing a big bill coming from Microsoft and basically being found guilty in a audit setup, especially with what Sasha said, is that Microsoft keeps a record of what you have changed. They can look into it, into the history. You cannot tell them, no, I always had the licenses, I just changed recently. They will know. You can use this as an intermediary. And we have seen these series being used all the way from sandbox to production for workloads which are eligible. So which can deal with only having 2.5 hours per day of full CPU performance, and your license cost craters.
Amazing. Can you still hear me? Sorry, I had to disconnect for a sec.
Yes, you're back with us, Sasha. I filled the void with another one of these.
Thank you. We had a fantastic comment from Christian here. I came late, but you caught me quickly. Thanks, Christian. Stefan, I want to ask you one simple question, but the answer could be quite difficult. What are the reasons that many organizations are not doing this now? What do you think? What stops them?
We see two reasons for this. The first is perceived risk, because behind many of these changes, there is a non-zero risk. Click the Azure Hybrid Use button. There is absolutely no risk to your workloads, but you're running into this license compliancy risk. Do the reservation. Do the wrong reservation and you committed a whole lot of money from the company, which may be not usable because the services changed. And now you have committed a lot of money to Microsoft, where you probably don't have the spending authority as the cloud engineer who has the permission in the portal to make this purchase. So you're extended your company over your authority. So again, you are taking a personal risk. If we are taking these resizings, the engineer may think, hey, from a performance point of view, it is sufficient, but the people in the business or database admin may say, no changes to my system. It works well. Hands off. Don't change anything. So it is often that there is a friction happening between individuals who have the idea that making this change has a non-zero, but a very acceptable small amount of risk, which, if well understood, could basically be pushed close to zero. It never is zero, but it can be really lowered with doing it in a caution, step-by-step way. Nevertheless, this non-zero risk, this committing of company resources, usually needs to be communicated up to senior leadership, maybe even to the executives in the company, which means that the engineer needs to be able to explain to his team lead or manager, who then needs to explain to his middle manager, who then needs to explain to his senior manager, who then needs to explain to the executive. And you can probably see there, this can possibly go wrong. And this is basically what we see. It is problems in the communication where, as the person who knows how to do the right thing, you often cannot bring this message to the party who can take the decision with the authority to accept the risk, to commit the company resources. And this is actually the biggest reason that we see for these decisions not being taken. Because let's be honest, if you keep everything on pay-as-you-go and you rent all your licenses, you're perfectly compliant. You also have not committed a company to any kind of a big one-off investment, means your job is safe. Make a huge reservation which goes south, you may get fired. Get the company in trouble with a Microsoft audit, you may get fired. Do other things which are actually good for the company, but if they are hitting you in a bad way, or you just make this one unlucky bet and it's just you on the statistic where 1 out of 100 times something goes wrong, you may get fired. You never get fired for pay-as-you-go. And this is where we see a whole lot of work not getting done because it's just safer. It's a bit like, these flight tickets. I once had this long time ago when I was still a junior consultant. I was told to book flight tickets and to book a plane. I didn't catch the plane. So I needed to get on another plane. I had to spend hours with my bookkeeping department at the time. explaining to them why I bought 2 tickets and why the second ticket was so expensive, because it was like a last minute, any plane you want to take off ticket. Ever since then, I always took the flexible option. It cost the company more.
Interesting. I want to add it to this, my observations is what we see in regards to license optimization and Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. There are multiple reasons, and in that regard, and it's the quickest win as we started this live with. In that regard, first of all, there's lack of knowledge.
Yeah, of course. Sure. If
Companies
you don't even know.
Just don't know. And the other much more unfortunate reason for not utilizing Azure Hybrid Use Benefit is that, especially in large organizations, is that FinOpsers who are mostly unaware about bring your own license benefits. It just happens so. The new FinOps generation that didn't want to deal with licensing, they wanted only to deal with the cloud. They were completely unaware of this. That's another kind of lack of knowledge. They know a lot about FinOps and maybe know what you know, Stefan, as well, but they just didn't consider that. In even the whole FinOps framework only recently introduced bring your own license, as far as I'm concerned. And the other thing is they don't talk to the software asset management department. For some bizarre reason, software asset management departments are independent from FinOps departments. There may be different reasons because they report to different stakeholders. There may be conflicting interests. There may be just personal conflicting interest, career progression. So
a good FinOps department,
they don't talk to each other.
A good FinOps department actually should, because in the new FinOps disciplines, licensing and SaaS, as well as one more, I just forgot the one, but licensing and SaaS is now one of the disciplines. But what we also observe is that it is way easier to have the conversations with the cloud engineers and the management. It is way easier to have them after building initial credibility on these easy savings with, for example, the database administrators, and convince them to revisit the disks they are using. Helps to talk about disk sector sizes and performance and show the metrics. So of course, you need to come prepared, but they tend to listen to you. As you say, software asset management tends to report to someone else, usually a different director in the IT organization, and convincing them that they should procure new licenses, which may go against their budget planning, even though it saves the company a lot of money, is a challenge. It definitely is, yes. But nevertheless, can be done. It is about communication and getting them in the boat, and then doing this journey together can lead to significant results. And sometimes you just need to have the executive saying, okay, there's a non-zero risk. Yep, we may need to buy new licenses. True up is going to happen in 3 months anyway. Just do it now. Do the savings right now. I'm going to take the risk for the company in the meantime. And you guys just figure out how many licenses that we need for true up, and then we fork out the money to Microsoft. And everybody's happy, even Microsoft.
Thank you, Stefan. We've slightly overrun by about 3 minutes, and apologies for that. We would like to invite you to follow us on our channels if you're not following us yet, because we're going to come back with similar informative sessions. We're going to have various, maybe more in-depth deep dives to certain aspects of what we discussed today. There may be something else. We're still coming up with ideas of what we want to talk, but we're sharing knowledge here. We're sharing it openly. If you want us to provide that service to you, you know where to find us. There's a, what is it? There's a QR code above, Stefan. And yeah, so I will promise this, at least one Azure-related live each month. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for watching it recorded, if you're watching it recorded. And see you next time, and good luck with your cost reduction efforts. Thank you, Stefan, for being with me today. Stefan Denk, our head of cloud. Yeah, the guy who halves Azure bills. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.